Picture a $4 bottle of Gatorade sitting in your hand. Now, imagine a small bowl of table sugar mixed with a pinch of salt. That second option costs about 20 cents to make, which means the drink you just bought costs 20 times more than its ingredients. The entire $33 billion global sports drink market exists because of that massive price gap. Sports nutrition companies love to claim their products are backed by decades of elite science, but the actual data tells a much different story about what you are really buying. Before this video ends, we are going to show you exactly how 3 companies turn pennies of sugar and salt into billion-dollar empires, and we will look at the internal playbook they used to do it. Let's find out how they pulled it off. Start with that $4 bottle sitting on a convenience store shelf and look at where the money actually goes. The retailer takes the first cut of that price, which usually lands between 30 and 50% depending on where you shop. Because impulse buys command a premium price, convenience stores sit at the high end of that range, but that premium comes with a cost. The brand might only walk away with $2 or $2.40 in net revenue after the store takes its piece. From that remaining amount, they have to cover the cost of ingredients, packaging, and manufacturing, which at a massive industrial scale usually lands between 15 and 40 cents per unit. What remains is the gross profit, and while it looks great on paper, the brand still has to pay for marketing, distribution, and the high cost of keeping that shelf space. Most people mess up when they analyze this category because they focus on the ingredients and miss the packaging story entirely. For a standard ready-to-drink bottle, the plastic, the labeling, the caps, the logistics of moving heavy liquid often cost more than the actual electrolytes and sugars inside. This is not just a rounding error, and it is the structural reason brands are quietly shifting their product mix toward powder sticks and sachets. A foil stick pack ships lighter and stores easier than a filled plastic bottle, which allows the brand to keep a much higher margin while the consumer pays roughly the same price per serving. The reality of the ingredients is even more extreme. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium are the core electrolytes in every sports drink, and these are just commodity mineral salts that cost fractions of a cent per gram when bought in bulk. Brands often position a specific glucose to fructose ratio as proprietary performance science, but that formula is just maltodextrin and fructose available from any bulk supplier. You could source the functional core of a premium sports drink for less than the raw beans in your morning coffee. Channel economics add another layer to the price you pay. Direct-to-consumer subscription models usually run at about 2 times the markup over the factory cost, but brick-and-mortar retail pushes that to 2.5 times or higher. Specialty or convenience channels can even hit 3 times the cost, which is why every growth brand that starts online eventually fights for grocery store placement. Even though the per unit profit looks worse in a grocery store, the sheer volume and visibility are how these companies win long term. So what are you actually paying for when you grab that bottle? It is not the sodium chloride or the fructose, but rather the certainty that this specific formula is better than anything you could mix at home. That feeling of certainty is manufactured through clinical language and athlete endorsements. But whether the science actually supports the price tag is a different question. But here's the twist. The marketing is often more powerful than the minerals. Stick around to see how they convinced us. 3 brands took 3 completely different approaches to the same basic commodity, and the results show you exactly where the value actually lives in this category. We have to start with Gatorade because they have an advantage that nobody else in this business can ever replicate. The drink was born inside a university lab back in 1965 when researchers at the University of Florida developed the formula for the Florida Gators football team. That origin story became the foundation for the brand's credibility, and even 60 years later, no competitor can just go out and buy that kind of history. You can outspend Gatorade on marketing all day long, but you can't manufacture the legitimacy of being invented by scientists for athletes because it was either true at the start or it wasn't. Today, Gatorade sits inside the PepsiCo Beverages North America division, which is where the real structural advantage comes into play. PepsiCo uses a direct store delivery network, often called the DSD system, to move product from the factory to the shelf faster and more efficiently than any challenger brand could dream of matching. Gatorade shares manufacturing lines, distribution routes, and massive joint sponsorship deals across the NFL and NBA with the rest of the PepsiCo family. Because of that shared infrastructure, the marketing cost for every single bottle is lower than what a standalone company has to pay. In the third quarter of 2023, Gatorade reported double-digit net revenue growth, but that didn't happen because they were selling more bottles. The growth came from pricing and mix, meaning the brand raised prices and pushed people toward more expensive versions of the drink. A cash cow like this doesn't need to grow at lightning speed as long as it holds its shelf space and lets the DSD machine do the heavy lifting. Liquid IV is a different story, and the math behind their acquisition is something you should really sit with for a second. Unilever paid somewhere between $500 and $525 million for the brand when it was only bringing in between $100 and $200 million in revenue. That is a very high price to pay for a product marketed under the cellular transport technology label, which is basically just a repackaged version of oral rehydration therapy. The World Health Organization developed that formula back in the 1960s, so while the science is real and it definitely works, it was already in the public domain decades before Liquid IV even existed. What Unilever actually bought wasn't a secret formula, but rather a massive subscriber base and the momentum of the stick pack format. They bought the right to push those powder sticks through the Unilever global retail network. And stay tuned, because this is where the strategy really paid off. After the acquisition, the brand moved from a model that focused on selling directly to consumers into grocery stores, club stores, and mass retail channels. Liquid IV could never have accessed those shelves that quickly on its own. So while the product stayed the same, the access changed completely. That is the acquisition thesis in one sentence, and it clearly worked because the brand is reportedly worth over $1 billion in revenue today. Then we have Prime, which is the ultimate example of what happens when the marketing is the actual product. In 2022, Logan Paul and KSI launched their sports drink and moved $250 million in sales in just the first year. By 2023, the brand was reportedly approaching $1.2 billion, but then the UK sales dropped by as much as 70% and US volumes started to follow. The hype cycle did exactly what hype cycles always do, and the brand began to cool off. The formula for Prime is just a standard electrolyte drink, and there isn't a single thing in the ingredient list that separates it from dozens of other brands. What made it different was the combined audience of two of the most watched creators on the internet pointing their followers at a bottle to make it feel like a cultural moment. That launch velocity was extraordinary, but here's the twist. Creator attention is an asset that loses value over time. Your cost to acquire a customer doesn't go down when your only defense is someone else's audience. Eventually, the audience moves on to the next big thing, and suddenly you're just another drink on a shelf next to Gatorade, fighting for profit without the distribution system to protect you. The scorecard for these three is pretty easy to read. Gatorade wins on long-term profit and cost advantages, while Liquid IV wins on the mechanics of moving into new stores. Prime wins on the initial launch, but loses on anything that requires staying power. There is one more data point you should know, because a review in BMJ Open found a striking lack of evidence behind most sports performance claims. The NAD has already ruled that having more electrolytes doesn't prove a drink is better at rehydrating you. The FTC now requires real clinical trials with hard performance results before a brand can make those claims stick. And as a result, most brands are quietly changing their language. So what does the actual winning playbook look like once you strip away all the fancy marketing talk? Let's find out. The first step is to find a real piece of sports science and build your own framework around it. The science doesn't even have to be brand new, but it has to belong to you in the way you tell the story. A company called Morton took old research about how the body absorbs carbohydrates and built a narrative around hydrogel technology. They now generate an estimated $40 to $52 million in revenue by selling to elite athletes at prices much higher than what Gatorade charges. The hydrogel concept is based on real physiology, but the premium price comes from the story they wrapped around the delivery system. The second step is all about the timing of your distribution. The brands that win usually aren't the ones with the best formulas, but the ones that hit the right store shelves at the perfect moment. Gatorade owned the delivery routes before anyone else understood how important they were, and Liquid IV jumped from online sales to retail stores at exactly the right time. Prime hit the market when the pathway from influencers to mass retail was wide open, but they struggled to keep that momentum going. The third step is managing your claims very carefully. The FTC has updated its guidance to require reliable scientific evidence before any health claim goes live. Smart companies now run specific tests on their finished products instead of just guessing based on the ingredients, because that is the only way to survive a legal challenge. The brands doing this right are investing in science that protects their claims rather than science that inspired the product in the first place. The real advantage was never actually about the drink itself. It comes down to the legal claims, the proof from athletes, the relationships with stores, and the belief that a specific formula is different from something you could mix in your own kitchen for 20 cents. Stick around, because as the regulations get tighter, the brands that can't prove their claims are going to disappear. The $33 billion sports drink industry shows exactly how companies turn basic ingredients into premium products by using science framing and tight distribution. Next time you grab a bottle, try to reverse engineer the money waterfall by looking at the retailer cut, the brand revenue, and the actual cost of goods. That massive margin gap proves the real value lives in the marketing rather than the electrolytes. But here's the twist. If you want to see how this same playbook works for sports apparel, where the profit margins are even higher, stay tuned for that breakdown in the next video. Subscribe now and let's find out together.